Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. You just got back from Japan, so you are a little jet lagged, but full of all kinds of interesting ideas and obviously maybe even a little bit more inspired.
I am. It was an amazing trip. It was the classical adventure, a little bit of everything. But what was super interesting, I think, was just this alignment of AI events that were happening while I was there. You had
Mm-hmm.
NVIDIA's AI Summit. The government
Mm-hmm.
ended up having a press conference where they announced a $65 billion investment in AI and a trilateral summit with France, Germany, and Japan. So a lot
Right.
happening in the AI space in Japan. That was great. But on the personal side, it was just great to just have a different perspective about culture, the food, just slowing things down a little bit. We were in Kyoto and Tokyo, seeing how society operates. It got me excited. It got me really inspired to come back here and to just really start building.
Excellent. Good. We've had a pretty busy couple of weeks on the AI news front, some updates, some new funding, and I've also just been writing a couple of op-eds as well. Where do you want to start today?
So let's start with sovereign AI. And I want to start with sovereign AI, one, because I was in Japan, and as I mentioned, you're seeing this flurry of activity in a country that basically is determined to not fall behind. They're determined to have some amount of control over their destiny. And they're willing to invest a lot to not just catch up, but to prepare their infrastructure for an AI future, to prepare their people for an AI future. And we're also seeing changes on the US front in terms of some of the stories with the change in administration. We also saw TSMC getting $6.6 billion for the
Yep.
CHIPS Act. And so just I think it's a nice place to start. I saw the op-ed that you wrote about Taurus and just being energy independent and what that means. I think infrastructure is just this amazing conversation that we can be having right now. So why don't we start there? Why don't we
Sure.
talk
Yeah.
about what's happening in the US first? We had elections. I hadn't had a chance to talk to you after elections. That will have big repercussions for the technology
Right.
space. What were your
Yep.
thoughts? How do you see the next 4 years playing out for AI specifically, and what builders are saying and what companies can expect?
I think the election results are basically a net positive for AI. The incoming administration has already said that their focus is going to be on AI, energy, and defense. So those are the three big spending areas or investment areas. So whether you like it or not, that's where the money is going to go. We've also seen the administration tap a couple of people into the conversation, whether they're roles within the administration or just advisory roles. Whether you like Elon Musk or not, he has a significant impact on the decision making right now. This is actually interesting. At first, I was like, what's that going to lead to? But I actually think that it's quite useful for somebody like that who's on the forefront of a lot of these things,
Yeah, yeah.
especially when it comes to big infrastructure type investments, big investments in AI specifically, and also the cybersecurity that's associated with that, which is a national defense issue, and the energy, which is a national defense issue. I think all of these things matter a lot. It doesn't really matter whether you like the Trump administration or whether you think that Kamala would have had a better opportunity to structure these things. But really, what we're seeing is a significant signal towards more AI investment, more infrastructure investments, specifically energy, but also some of the other things like cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the applications of that is defense. We've got the general grid structure and transmission structure that's going to need to support that. My article goes into some detail about how we're seeing a distribution era
Hmm.
when we were just getting into the internet. If anybody can remember how old they were 20 years ago or 24 years ago, when the
Yeah.
internet was really getting going, the big news, of course, there was distribution. How do you take something that's centralized, that's monolithic, that's a mainframe type structure, and make it distributed? The advantages of distribution, of course, are that it's a much more robust system.
Hmm.
So if one, think about it like this: if a server goes down, it's not a big deal. You've got a distributed data structure, you've got a distributed information structure. You're pushing things towards the edge of that network, closer to the consumer of that information, and really that's making it more robust. It's just
Hmm.
a network effect, or a consequence of the network effect, I should say. We're seeing the same thing with energy right now, and we're seeing the exact same thing with defense. So in energy, what's happening is you cannot rely on a single monolithic generator or power plant or nuclear plant to support your needs. So you're going to start to see a lot of these in the smaller distributed energy sources. So what you're going to see is something like we wrote about. Taurus has got both a generation and storage
Hmm.
and management solution wrapped around or that is wrapped in a cybersecurity solution as well. So they're thinking across all those different dimensions. You're going to see a lot more of this, a lot more companies showing up to say, hey, we've got a small distributed solution that can plug into the grid. We're not going to try and replace the grid. We're not going to say, hey, let's bring on a nuclear facility in the next 10 years, which, by the way, that's about the timeline it takes to bring on a brand new nuclear facility, or even start up an old one. So
That
that's
is
why we
wild.
saw Amazon getting told, "Yep, you're not going to get support for bringing nuclear online anytime soon." Part of that is also because of the fact that bringing on a new power station of that size is incredibly disruptive to what they call a power factor, which is how you manage energy up and down the grid so that you don't get these massive surges or drops in
Mm.
energy distribution. So that's the biggest problem that energy has to face, is how do you manage the consistency of energy? And these distributed sources are going to help with that because they're going to decentralize that. Defense, same thing. No longer does it make any sense to have a huge, big aircraft carrier or 200 tanks on the field, because these are very large objects that can get taken out with a single drone, 1,000 or like a drone that
Wild.
costs $2,000 that's made by DJI and carrying a 7 pound bomb. Your 9 million, $10 million tank is basically just going to get taken out. So
Yeah,
what we're seeing is drones and the associated software and hardware driven by AI become a lot more of the conversation. You're seeing conferences around the world right now about how we're going to distribute those defense capabilities. It's actually really hard to keep up right now. I've been trying to follow the conference summit, whatever you want to call it, programming that's going on around the world right now for counter UAS and some of the other things that are going on. And it's just, there's like a conference every week. I mean, you could
yeah.
literally make a full-time job just going to defense conferences about counter drone and counter UAS. And, it's a massive topic. It's not going to get easy very quickly, because not only do you have to invent this technology in many cases, but you've actually got to build it. And if you're not relying on Chinese or Korean manufacturers, like some of the EAR or ITAR restrictions or requirements enforce companies to follow, you're going
Yeah.
to have to start from scratch. You're going to have to build batteries from scratch. You're going to have to build propellers from scratch. You're going to have to build the casings from scratch. A lot of this is carbon fiber, ARM technologies. So we're looking at a lot of new innovation that's going to happen. So to answer your question, in in short, what does this new government need to do, or what should they do? Is they have to make these investments. They have to make local U.S. manufacturing and innovation investments. They don't really have a choice right now, and it's happening. So we're seeing a lot of programming around that. Replicator is a big program. We can go direct to phase two, which means essentially if you've got a prototype, you can take it to the DoD, you can take it to the Air Force, you can say, hey, we've got something, it's working,
Hmm.
and start to work with the government to get that stuff fast tracked into production. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time if you're an entrepreneur, and it's
Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
scary time if you're a consumer, just watching the news. If you just happen to be a spectator on the side, lots of change, lots of scary things to consider, terrifying moments on television where you see these drones basically taking out things and seeing the vulnerability of our grid system. But if you're an entrepreneur, this is a massively fun time to be alive, because you've got so many good problems to solve, and there's tons of money and tons of initiatives to support those entrepreneurs.
I love that. What I am most excited about, to your point, is the feeling of this moment that we're in. where if you're an entrepreneur, you're getting that itch that this is a moment that's calling you to act and to do something. And if you're not an entrepreneur and you're looking for a career change, these are going to be ripe industries that you can look to explore and to grow in, and to bring your skill sets, if you're a designer, to think through how you can build human-centered solutions for
Mhm.
aerospace and defense and energy. When you look at Taurus, it's so non-traditional when you compare it to like when you think of a traditional energy system. It looks sexy. Like you want that in your house, and you want that sort of product in your data center and your warehouses.
I think that's a really good point, Chris, is that, if you look at the technology that's supporting the grid right now, if you look out your window and you look at a transformer that's sitting on a telephone pole or a power line, that's probably 30-year-old technology. I don't think
Yeah.
that's been reinvented or re-energized,
Yeah.
to use a little pun here, for a long time. And that's a big deal, because the more we consider how we live, what the conditions that we're willing to live in, the more we need to consider these things. So it's not really just an aesthetic thing, like, oh, that thing looks good. I wouldn't mind
Mhm.
having that in my backyard, or my municipality has just invested this thing. It's actually it's a serious consideration for the attractiveness of both residences and
Mhm.
towns
Yeah.
as they start to become more competitive with each other. So purely economically, if you're running a town, if you're the municipality, if you're the mayor, if you're the council that's running a town, a lot of your considerations are, how do I make this a safe, interesting, and also aesthetically attractive place to live?
Yeah.
And a lot
Yeah.
of that has to do with, can we take these nasty power lines down and replace them with something else? Can we take these transmission centers that take up a lot of real estate, that are actually at security risk as well, at both
Yeah.
local and national security risk? And how do we make those things less vulnerable and take up less space, so that we can then reallocate that space to the things that we really need to, whether that's parks or schools, or some other investment? So these are a design problem. If you're a designer and
Yeah.
you're concerned about AI taking your job, you have never been more wrong about anything in your life. Now, does that mean you're not going to have to make some changes to how you present yourself as a designer? Absolutely, you will have to. Does this mean you're going to have to adopt some new skills? Yes, you're going to have to understand how these technologies work, how these Gen AI frameworks fit into your existing workflow, how you are going to work with the full stack of other people in your cross functional team. You're going to have to be friends with engineers, whether you like
Mhm.
it or not. You're going to have to be friends with the business people, whether you like it or not. You're going to have to think about where physically you're located. If you're doing this kind of municipal level, or federal level work, you may have to change your physical location to be closer to the centers of control, to be the
Yeah.
centers closer to the centers of decision making. But as a designer, we've never needed you more. So I go on LinkedIn and I see a lot of people complaining that,
Mhm.
design's been left behind, and Gen AI is going to replace your job. Well, if you're saying that, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
You do not understand how these tools work. You do not understand how the world works. These tools are not designed to solve problems. They are efficiency tools. They are productivity tools. They are not problem solving tools, and they won't be for some time still. So there's still like a good 10 or 15 years for designers to make it a serious mark on what's been on innovation, on product, on services.
Agreed. Love that. So I'm going to draw the parallel now to what I saw in Japan, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
paint the picture of the conversations that are happening there. Just looking at the NVIDIA AI Summit. And one of the things I love about watching Jensen Huang over time is watching the evolution of the language that he uses to describe what NVIDIA does and who they are, because that has obviously changed. And during this conference, I noticed that he started saying they are in the business of simulation. They simulate like graphics, and now they're
Mm-hmm.
simulating intelligence, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really well put, because then you start to see the parallels between them being a gaming company pretty much back in the past to how they
Right.
ended up being into AI and one of the leaders, because it's all about simulation. And in terms of what they're doing with Japan, they had a chance to have a fireside chat with Masayoshi Son around where Japan needs to invest. And I thought it was very poignant. And I'm going to talk about the three areas that I see Japan looking to double down on. One, they're going to build a supercomputer with the DGX superpods. Actually, SoftBank will get the first B200 series of GPUs. And so they're going to have a pretty powerful supercomputer. Not the most powerful in the world, but the most powerful that Japan would have built up until now. And then the second thing that they're doing, they're working with telecoms to build what is called AI RAN. And it's a new sort of way in which you're using the 5G network to be delivering AI services. And so what they talked about was the fact that the majority of time the infrastructure that 5G is running on isn't being used. And during those downtimes, it's possible that you can be using it to deliver AI intelligence. And so that will be like the super highway of AI throughout the entire country. And then the third piece is a marketplace where if you are a third party or NVIDIA themselves, you'll be able to build solutions and offer it and pull in that intelligence wherever you need it on the go, in hardware, on the edge. And so it's really brilliantly thought through, but it's given us a glimpse in terms of the places that we will also need to invest in the US. You spoke about energy. We spoke about potentially exploring nuclear and other sources of energy. We spoke about the data centers like TSMC doing the fab for the chips that will go into some of these massive data centers that are being built across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next piece will be distribution. How do you get that to people on the go? How do you get it to homes, to devices, to cars,
Right.
to robots? And so it's just really amazing. But there was this funny moment in the conference where Jensen Huang said to Sun, "Do you remember that you were the largest shareholder of NVIDIA at one point in time?" And it was so funny. But at the end of the conference, he went back to it. And then Sun reminded him that he tried to take control of NVIDIA three times. There was the first time when he offered Jensen Huang a loan to buy NVIDIA outright and privatize it. And
Mm,
Jensen didn't take it and he was just kicking himself. And then the second was when he bought up the shares himself in the public market. And then the third was when they acquired ARM and they were trying to do the ARM merger with NVIDIA. But they had a good laugh about it. But it just goes to show how far ahead a lot of the times these projects are in planning and the vision
mm,
that you'll need to have in terms of the opportunity for AI and the new chips that we're using to accelerate computing and, of course, intelligence. But I think it's exciting if you're a company, if you're a country thinking through where you should be investing, because the opportunity is certainly ripe right now. And the one thing I'll always stress is it comes back to literacy. For us, we want to ensure people are educated. We want to ensure businesses are educated. We want to ensure the
mm-hmm.
government is educated. And so, to your point,
Mm-hmm.
having leaders know informing and advising the government, I think it's super smart because one of the big concerns that I had in the past was I wasn't sure if representatives actually understood the opportunity and the concerns and the moment that we were in. And I
Yep.
hope now we'll have more voices at the table that will say, hey, this is how we make things more accessible, or this is how we have a more public conversation around the dangers or the threats or the opportunities. So it's super exciting time, I think, for everyone across the board.
If you look at the number of case studies that are now available, we're starting to see evidence and ROI cases for AI. Up
Mm,
until now, a lot of this has been abstract. A lot of our conversations have been what if conversations. We're now starting to connect the dots with stuff that's actually happening, like real world examples. This is how AI was used here. This is how it was used there. Let's see it in action. Whether that's something like Taurus using AI as a way to manage the energy grid, or in our defense conversations, whether we're using AI to, knock other drones out of the sky, or just good old fashioned business conversations. Hey, we used this particular type of AI to create an agent or to make this thing, and this is what happened. And I'm not talking about the efficiency gains or the productivity gains that AI pundits always talk about. They both use this in the sense of ROI and also as the big kind of scary monster, which
yeah.
is, AI is coming for your job. It's going to take away the things that you're doing. Well, yeah, that is possible. But what we're actually starting to see is case studies where we're not just using AI for productivity gains or opportunities to speed a particular process up, which in my mind is inconsequential compared to how the ROI might look if I use AI to close a deal. What is the ROI for my company if I'm able to close 10 more deals this year?
Mhm.
That's what's interesting. It's not about efficiency. It's about, can I get more done? Not from a point of view of like, oh, I have less, admin to do, or I have less, of the process stuff to do because the AI is going to do it. But can I reach more customers?
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
close better deals? Can I have a better relationship with my customer? Those are the really interesting conversations. And they're subtle, but very importantly different. We're going to see more case studies. And I think that you and I, as AI literacy experts and well, self-proclaimed experts, we are also responsible for gathering those
Yeah.
case studies and helping people who watch the show and read our newsletters and come to the website for the articles to see more of that. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to write about Taurus, is because I want companies to see this is not just a concept. It's not just an idea. It's
Hmm.
actually being used by practical companies in practical settings. And I think that's really kind of one of the considerations here. The other thing I want to go back to is you talked about a simulation. The reason why companies are now starting to think about simulation in the context of AI is because that is how natural intelligent systems work. So we'll probably have to do an entire episode on this, but there is a lovely book called The Brief History of Human Intelligence, which is so dense that the title should be something else. It should be the ridiculously dense and difficult to read book on human intelligence. But one of the things that we're starting to notice as we get better and better at understanding the human brain is that the only way the human brain works, the only way that intelligence exists at all, is because of our ability to simulate. It is impossible, regardless of how many neurons you have, to simulate the world one to one. In other words, you cannot have a one to one map of
Mm.
everything that is in the world. You would need a model as big as the universe to model the universe, which is impossible. So, what you have to have is essentially a hallucination of what you imagine the world to be. This is the simulation that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, at a core level of your neural structure is your ability to model the world in a simulated way. And what that means is we're shortcutting the process. So instead of trying to model every single thing that happens in the world, we're making a bunch of assumptions. What we have to do is go to where the human intelligence has gone, which is, hey, this 4 pound, you know, meaty, fatty thing in your brain obviously can't take on all the information. So we're going to do a bunch of shortcuts. And the LLMs are starting to learn from that as well. They're saying, great, instead of training it on everything, we're going to give it the option to make some stuff up, make some assumptions. And so here we're seeing biology come together with the technology right now. And that's really exciting for me as a biologist, but it's also super exciting for the scientists who are working on this because we already have a working model and we're staring at it every time we look at the mirror.
All right. So, Richard, there are a couple of things I'm going to do now. I want us to take a stab at all the fundraising that we're seeing in the space, right? And we talk
Mm-hmm.
about companies that are adopting AI, and we covered probably 9 or 10 different companies just over the last week that have
Mm-hmm.
raised ridiculous numbers of money, like CoreWeave at 650 million, to companies that are raising like maybe 10, $15 million for their Series A, right? And so
Tesla, 125.
yeah, Tesla. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just call out a couple of companies that I'm excited about. And if you want, you can just ask me about others or bring up ones that you're
Mm-hmm.
interested in.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
I also want to take this time to point out that you also have companies that are failing. This week we saw Forward, the AI health
Yep.
startup that had the care pods and was using AI to rethink primary care. They're shutting down completely. In the next couple of weeks, they're just kind of closing down. They weren't able to raise more money and they weren't profitable. The numbers just didn't add up for them. And so I think that's also a reminder that at the end of the day, you are still running a business and you want to be very thoughtful and careful as to where the technology is today, how it can be used, and solving an actual problem that people have versus trying to lead just with a technology. All
Hmm.
right, so a couple companies that I'm super excited about are Tesla. Tesla raised $125 million. And I think for Tesla, what's interesting is that they actually don't have a product as yet. They have probably shown things in a private demo, but they're building a new approach to software development. And it's not that they're building another code editor like you're seeing with Codium or Cursor. They're actually looking at the language itself and they're saying, hey, we want people to be able to code in natural language. We want people to just be able to say what they want and have the AI go out, interpret it, and build the exact solution. They have funding from Index Ventures, Axel, GV, and Bold Start Ventures. And I think it's going to be novel if they're able to crack that because it means that
Hmm.
so many more people will be able to enter the space of software development. And it also means rethinking what software development actually is. Because right now you have all these
Hmm.
different languages, and what if an AI is able to come up with a more efficient language? Because
Hmm.
it just needs to understand what we want to do, and then it can go to and implement it however it seems fit. And so I think you'll have some really interesting outputs that we probably can explore down the road. But for the time being, it's very simple. They're looking to have natural language being that base programming language, and then being able to integrate with all the new tools like Cursor and GitHub Copilots of the world, where you'll be able to use whatever interface you're familiar with. They raised $100 million in their Series A, along with an additional 25 million from a seed round, and they're hoping to have their first product in early 2025. But
Wow.
it's a solid team. They have a lot of experience. Just keep them on your radar if you're a VC, if you're an investor, kind of just thinking, hey, which companies are out there doing cool stuff? Tesla is going to be one
Hmm.
of them you should be looking at.
And just to be clear, that's Tesla, not Tesla.
Yes, yes.
Very easy to confuse us.
Yes, very, very, very good point. It's TESSL, not Tesla. And at the same time, there's another company this week, Codium, that released a new development tool. It's an AI agent called Windsurf Editor. And within Windsurf Editor, they have Windsurf basically is going to be like your typical code editor. They're all built now off Visual Studio, so they all look the same. It's very familiar for web developers. But behind the
Hmm.
scenes, they have something called Cascade. And they're talking about flow states and how they can automate a lot more of the development process when you're coding. And so they released this new product a couple weeks ago. Cursor was the hottest thing. And I'm telling you, developers are looking at Windsurf and they're in love. It's super impressive, and that's going to go a far way. The other thing I'll say here is that OpenAI also quietly announced some new features for the ChatGPT desktop app. And the biggest feature is that it can now communicate with your other apps, including Visual Studio, text editor, Git, your terminal. And so what can happen
Yeah.
now is that you can, rather than copying and pasting code from the different apps, you're going to be able to interact with them directly just from your ChatGPT desktop app, or if you have the like partner applications within Visual Studio, you'll be able to do a lot more. But you're seeing a lot in this space when it comes to writing code or developing code with AI. And so I am very excited to see what developers are going to be leaning into. But we're seeing products from Codium, we're seeing products from OpenAI, and of course, new startups like Tesla that are all out to win in this new space.
Yeah, it's a really cool space, especially if you're a cross-functional team and you're trying to understand what it is that's actually going on with the engineering, with the code. I mean, this is the kind of world I live in where we've got designers, developers, front end, back end. We've got marketers. We've got a bunch of people who are all working on the same product in different ways. And then, of course, we've got the customer input. We've got the feedback that's coming back from the customer. If this is an enterprise tool, you've
Mm,
got that, hey, this thing isn't working exactly as we wanted it to, or could you make it work in our environment? We've got this kind of setup or this kind of framework that we're using or a workflow that we have to administer to this work.
yeah.
And tools like this are starting to bring that conversation together. I can start to see how, if I make this change, what will be the impact without having to necessarily take my entire engineering team and pull them off the project. So you can almost have these parallel paths where AI is helping you understand what that might be, prototype a future that doesn't need to necessarily be an entire branch of the work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
kind of cool to see how it's happening. Not exactly sure how it's going to play out for all these companies, but I do see this being a significant area of change from a workflow point of view.
One thing I will say, to your point, as a how it will work out, you're also starting to see acquisitions. And so this week, Anysphere, who manufactures, they're the ones that make Cursor, they
Mm-hmm.
acquired Supermaven. And Supermaven had their own approach to AI software development. And so now you're starting to see consolidation already within the space where companies are recognizing, well, it's better for us to bring our teams together and build a more powerful solution versus
Mm-hmm.
sometimes to keep running. Because again, a lot of these models will take a lot of investment. And rather than you trying to run on a shoestring budget, if you can combine resources, have a smarter team, that may be the fastest path to success, especially when you're up against well-funded companies like OpenAI.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
The other startup that I'm going to highlight is Robin AI. And
Mm-hmm.
Robin AI is in the legal space. And we saw where other companies like Harvey were doing a lot. Thomas Reuters with acquired Casetext. So you saw where companies were looking at how AI would change the legal landscape. And Robin is one of these companies that just really has been taking the space by storm. And what's interesting here is that they $25 million dollars in additional funding. I think it was in January that they raised 26 million. These are from their customers. Their
Yep.
customers love their products so much that they're investing an additional 20. They didn't need it. But why not raise it if you can right now? And so they have an additional 25 million dollars. I think they're at $10 million dollars annual recurring revenue at this point in time. But they highlight specific things like AI powered document analysis. They have now an 80-person legal team globally. And so they're not just looking to completely outsource legal solutions, they're combining humans in the loop
Mm-hmm.
with AI to provide a better product ultimately. And the use cases are just amazing. I'm going to read one use case that I highlighted in the article, but in one case, Robin AI helped a US biotech firm review 10,000 contracts in 72 hours following a data breach, a task that would typically take a week and cost $2.6 million dollars through traditional legal channels. That is, when you talk about ROI, right? Like that's ROI right there. And so to your point, yes, companies are using AI. Yes, companies are seeing tangible differences to their bottom line because of the decisions that they're making to adopt these technologies.
I think this is probably worth putting a little bit of emphasis on. When companies think of how AI might impact their business, they might, especially in, this case is actually really good. So in the legal context, there might be a maybe a bias towards thinking, oh, AI will replace the lawyer or
Mm,
replace that high visibility interaction between the lawyer and the customer, or between the maybe the judge and the lawyer, or something like that.
yeah.
But what we're actually aware of now when we see Robin and companies like this take off is that most legal work is document review. Most legal work is making sure that SLAs are kept where they need to be. Most legal work isn't the legal work that you and I see, it's the paralegal work that happens in the
Yeah.
background.
Yeah.
So, reading documentation, even if it's something simple like a divorce, well, not that that's necessarily simple, but assuming that it's less complicated than maybe a civil lawsuit against a big
Yeah.
company or something like that. Reviewing documentation, understanding the documentation, understanding where the insight might be. AI is way better than human beings at that. Way better. Like,
Yeah.
not only
Yeah.
can you read and understand all that documentation in a short space of time, but you can see the clarity of the insights far quicker, right? A human being that has to read 700 documents, by the time they got to the 700th document, they forgot what they read in the first one. It's like, never mind anything else. So, this is where it's really important. You will actually start to trust AI more than you trust people when it comes to tasks like this.
Hmm.
When it comes to tasks like reviewing x-rays, when it comes to tasks like reviewing documentation, this is where you will go, I don't want a human being involved in that.
Yeah.
They get tired, they get distracted. they get drunk. Who
Mm.
knows what's going on in their life, right? I want somebody that never sleeps, that never gets tired, that never loses focus, and that has the ability to memorize and remember all this stuff forever. That's what I want. And that's why Robin AI actually listened to an interview with the founder. And as you say, this happened so quickly and it happened with such value. Like the ROI on this was so valuable that their customers were basically telling them, look, we're going to fund this. And I think this is actually a really good point because I was talking to a company yesterday, and it was yesterday or maybe on Friday, that is building a platform that will essentially replace the recruitment process, right? The human,
Yeah, yeah,
reviewing, 5,000 CVs or resumes and then like, inputting all that data and then
yep.
setting up phone calls. Well, this company is going to replace all that. And they were saying, well, how much money do we need to raise? And I was saying, I don't think you need to raise any money. I think what you need is just the customer to see what you've created. And I then got a demo of the product, and they have completely designed every aspect of that interface. And when you see it, you're like, please just sign me up. You know,
Pay my
I
money.
can see you can, yeah, if you're a big company, you're going to save millions of dollars in
Yeah,
HR expenses
yeah,
and recruiting expenses. So why not just give them the money to go and build this platform? They quite easily get this platform out there within the next 6 months because it's already half done. So yeah, I think that this is a path not just for a company like Robin AI, but it's for so many companies.
yeah.
Go to your customers, show them what you're building, let them give you the money. You don't necessarily want VC money. VC money is not great. Comes with lots of strings attached,
Too many
right?
strings.
And maybe just like a slightly finer point on this, you also don't need to go and hire a marketing team or a sales team. The founders, the engineers, the product people that are building this thing, go to your customers, show
Yeah,
them what you're making. You will be a better evangelist and a better marketing team, a better sales team than anybody else that you could possibly hire. Go and tell them what you're doing, show them what you're doing, and you will get the money you need. You'll get the ARR you need.
yeah, I love that. So a couple of other companies, we don't have time to dive into them, but what I love is just the diversity that you're seeing in terms of the companies that are raising money and where you're seeing AI being applied. I'm just going to call them out. Go over to Maginative.com. There are full articles on all of these companies. If you're an investor, if you're just an enthusiast trying to learn more about the different spaces, you'll find all the details that you need there. The first company is called Tourlane. They raised $26 million
Hmm.
dollars, and they're looking at AI in the travel industry, and they're using AI with a lot of the planning that you need when you're taking a trip. And of course, I was just in Japan, and one of the things that I had to try was to say, hey, use ChatGPT to build out an itinerary to just see what it would do. And so it's exciting to see companies putting it in that space. There's a company called Mediloop. They raised $15 million to look at medical research, right? And how they can optimize that process, ensure that the time to just get in drugs and so on developed can be cut down, especially with the research side of things. There's a company called Odyssey that's looking to create a digital twin of the world by having people walk around
Mm-hmm.
and take like video of the world.
This is
I
like
think,
the Google Map cars that you see driving around, or
yes,
when you see them with the cameras. You're literally a human being with cameras all over them, just walking down a trail or
exactly,
up
exactly.
through a mountain. Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's wild because you need the data, right? Like AI is hungry for data, and rather than relying on shitty data, you can now have actual footage that you have people capturing of the real world. And so when you're then
Hmm.
simulating it, it's a lot more realistic. A company called
Yeah.
11X raised a $50 million Series B from A16Z to create
Hmm.
digital workers. So we started talking about agents before the recording, and here you have like companies that are building out full on digital workers, where you'll be able to go out and hire a marketing person to join your company, or rent a marketing company, a marketing person, as
Hmm.
Jensen puts it.
Hmm.
So overall, you're just seeing just this broad spread. There's an industry. AI is touching that industry in some way. What you need to be thinking about is, well, where are the opportunities, where are the points of where are the bottlenecks right now in our processes and our workflows and our industry that AI can come in and maybe accelerate things or maybe make things a bit more efficient, or maybe help with asking the right questions and providing some solutions.
Yeah, I mean, Writer was another one, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
raised $200 million. I like Writer. Again, I was listening to an interview with the founder this week, and something worth pointing out to entrepreneurs or people that are designing or creating tools right now is that a really good place to start, and this might be counterintuitive, is at the enterprise level. Build your product to be enterprise ready. Essentially, start at the top and then go down to
Mm,
the consumer level products. Consumer is expensive, takes a long time, and you're going to need a lot of customers to make this work. And I don't think that consumers are quite ready for a lot of what AI has to offer yet. Not because they are scared of it, but because they are making the assumption that Apple, Google, Microsoft, etc., are going to bubble up these tools in the services that they're already paying for. If
yeah,
you're already an Apple customer, you just assume that Siri is going to get smarter. If you're an Amazon customer, you just assume that Alexa is going to get
yeah,
smarter. You don't
yeah,
have to think, oh, I'm going to make an investment in this. You're thinking this stuff is going to happen.
yeah,
Enterprises are not thinking like that. They're thinking the opposite. They're thinking we need to make that investment. In Writer's case, if you're going to make an improvement to your workflow and you want some kind of assistance in making that workflow more effective, then you're going to go to a company like them and say, we have complex workflow. We need help with that.
yeah,
And they're going to have a price point that matches the enterprise that also helps them develop their product. They're not going to be able to sell these things at $40 a month and make money. They're going to need to sell these things at $1 million or $2 million a year for them to get the momentum that will ultimately lead to a consumer solution.
yeah.
But I think Writer is a good example. If you're the CEO or the founder of a company right now in the AI space, I think start at the enterprise level. I highly recommend that. Go up and work your way down because those are the companies that are making the investments. Those are the ones with the budgets and the tech stacks to support these kinds of tools, these kinds of frameworks.
It's funny that you say that, Richard, because I remember a few months ago, I had said the business case for consumer AI hadn't been made as yet. I think this is a really great way of articulating that because, to your point, yes, enterprises will spend. There is an obvious opportunity for ROI with a business when they see a product that they can invest in that allows them to double their sales or allows them to be more efficient in terms of customer service requests that are coming in versus a consumer when they have to make a conscious effort. And right now the models are super expensive to train, they're super expensive sometimes to even use for inference, and the costs will go down over time. This week we saw where I think O1 they were able to train a GPT-4 class model with a fraction of the resources that OpenAI used a year ago. And that just goes to show that yes, if you start at the top with enterprise, eventually that technology will get cheaper, it will
Yeah.
become more accessible, that you can make it available to consumers.
This is a lesson that we learned during the first wave of internet, right? The first wave of consumer available things is that it takes a lot of money and a lot of time to build a consumer facing company. We then saw this again where PLG was apparently going to be the savior of these companies. Like, oh, you can build a SaaS company, but guess what? You can build a product that's so amazing
Yeah.
that people will just know how to use it. They'll just show up on your website or download your app and it'll immediately be obvious to them. Well, that proved to be a complete load of horseshit as well, because very, very rarely do you meet a product for the first time and go, I know exactly what the value is here. I know exactly how to use this. This is much more true in the business environment, SMB, enterprise, any layer than it is at consumer, but very, very, very important that when your customer meets your product for the first time, you are going to need to support that. And that means you're going to have to provide services. You need services to give that customer the opportunity to adopt and use and eventually expand product usage within your organization. That's okay. I know VCs are like, rolling in their beds right now going, oh my God, don't talk
Product-led
about
growth.
services. Ignore your VCs. Take it from me, somebody who's been in the space for a long time. Ignore your VCs. You need services to get enterprise products, SMB products, whatever they are, into a business. It'll
Yeah.
be worth the investment, even if it's, you know, 20% of your revenue or more at first. Use those services to drive the growth, drive the adoption. You will benefit from that when it comes time for renewals. When renewals come around and customers say, you know, we really know how to use this tool. We really see the
Yep.
value of it. We really see adoption. We
Yeah.
want to renew. Versus what I see most often in my advisory work is that comes around for renewal and customers say, we don't know why we bought this. We can't remember why we bought this. We haven't used it much. We've
Yep.
forgotten that first, you know, digital training session that you gave us, and we haven't used it since. So it's just no interest in it. That is not the kind of customer you want. You want a customer that is excited about your product, and that's going to require services. So, you know, this is very antithetical to what a lot of VCs would be telling you about building a product first, product led company.
Hmm. Hmm.
I 100% disagree with that. I think you build a services driven enterprise tool that can get adopted by a handful of big ticket item customers or customers that are willing to pay for a big ticket, and you partner with them and you work with them to build a better product, and eventually that becomes so important to their workflow that they don't want to switch to another company.
You know, Richard, I think we should do an entire segment on this topic, and here's the reason why. I think a part of that is because companies are doing such a shitty job with educating their customers, and so
Mm-hmm.
at the literacy level, it's a problem because you have a lot of companies today that are adding AI solutions into their products. Their customers don't know and they're overwhelmed because of how they're adding it and how they're communicating this change to the customer. Like they just feel like they're being bombarded with new things and eventually they shut off. And if you're not investing in that service part of the business, as you're saying, and you're leaving it up to your customers to discover exactly what's happening, it's lights out for you. And so I
Totally.
definitely think this is going to be a topic that or audience will benefit greatly from if we are able to dive a little bit deeper into it.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. So last couple of things that I'm going to point out. We talked about products. So let's talk about some exciting products that dropped this week that I think people should be paying attention to. The first is that Google launched a Gemini app for iOS. It's a
Mm-hmm.
standalone Gemini app. It's no longer a part of the Google app. You can download it separately and it will give you no Gemini Live, which is basically the
Mm.
advanced voice mode that you see in ChatGPT, where you can talk to it. It sounds very human. You can interrupt it, and it feels more conversational. If you haven't had a chance to do it, grab the new Gemini app, download it, and play around with it. Google behind the scenes has been doing a fantastic job just upgrading their models. They actually have a new experimental model that's at the top of the Limsys leaderboards right now. So people are excited what's happening on the back end of with Google, and I think this Gemini app is worth checking out. The second application that you'll want to probably look at if you're into video production, Final Cut Pro is now at version 11. After 13 years, you are now at Final Cut
Amazing.
11. And Apple is leaning into AI a lot for this release. The thing with Apple, as we know, is that they're not going to be the first with most of the features that you're going to be seeing in the product. So if you're in other tools, it's likely that you have seen a lot of these tools, automatic masking, transcription
Mm-hmm.
services. But it's great to see Apple bringing this to their pro tools. And it's now available as a free upgrade for people that have the product already. Otherwise, you'll need to buy it for $300. And then finally, Anthropic released a new product as a part of Claude that is called a prompt improver. And so basically,
Mm-hmm.
what this does, you can go into Claude Console, and let's say you're a developer, you're building out a product, and you have a prompt, and you want to figure out how you can improve the output of that prompt. You can put in that prompt, and Claude will use AI to rewrite that prompt for you.
Yeah, I love this. I love this because being a good prompt writer shouldn't necessarily need to be a skill set. Like
Exactly.
initially, when we started out doing AI literacy stuff, we were teaching people how to write prompts. They were like, "I'm just not getting what I want out of my AI."
Yep.
I'm like, "Well, your prompts suck." But that is one of those things that AI should be able to help you with, right? It
Exactly.
should tell you, listen, the thing that you wrote doesn't make any sense. Like, would
Exactly.
you prefer to write it like this? Or here's an example for how to do that better. And I think that's where AI is valuable, is that it's not just making the assumption that you know how to use it, but rather it's learning that, yeah, you don't really know how to use it. It's just like
Yep.
working with a child. Hey, I didn't expect you to be able to do that first time around. I'm going to give you some guidance. I'm going to help you until you can eventually do it on your own.
Exactly. And what's funny here is what you mentioned earlier. They're able to actually use AI to come up with examples, synthetic data. It will generate synthetic examples for the model to use as it's responding to your prompt. And so it thinks about what it thinks you're trying to articulate, and then it generates examples so that it can know how to do it. And of course, you have control in terms of making changes, etc. But again, it's one of those tools that when you start to think through how do you build user-centered products, what do developers need, what do people that are using these models actually find valuable. Something like a prompt improver is definitely the top of the list. And this isn't new. Of
Right.
course, behind the scenes, for example, with ChatGPT, when you ask it to generate an image, they will rewrite the prompts for you so the model can interpret
Mm-hmm.
it better. And so this just exposes it to you as the developer or to the customer so that you can make changes and you can learn from it. I think this is going to be a big deal. I've been using it with some of our master prompts to see what it recommends in terms of changes, and it's interesting. Like I'm now taking it personally. I'm like, huh, is that actually a better output than than what I would?
Be coachable, Chris. Be coachable.
This is true. With that, I think we have covered so many things this week, and there are a lot more stories on the website. Two that come to mind: AlphaFold 3 is now open source. This is a big deal because AlphaFold is the gold standard when it comes to protein folding and AI,
Mm-hmm.
and it can change so much when it comes to drug development and biology and understanding just the foundational nature of like cellular structures and so on. And so I
Right.
I'm really excited that they decided to open source this product. They
Mm-hmm.
walked back on just having isomorphic labs basically have access to it. And then the second story is that NASA is working with Microsoft to create an Earth Copilot. And this is really interesting because NASA has all of this data, like satellite data of the Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody knows how to take advantage of it. And so, what if you had a model that was trained on all of this data that you could ask questions about? And so you can say, hey, during COVID, what was the like air quality like in these different countries and how did it relate to 5 years before? Again, we have all of this data, but nobody bothers to even look at it because it's such a burden to go in and try to figure out the tools to use to access this. And so this is another use case where AI will make things more accessible and hopefully help us to answer the questions that we want and maybe build solutions, inspire somebody to start a company, etc. So love these. Tons of other stories on imaginative.com. Head on over there. You'll find the most important stories in AI every week. But with that, Richard, any final words, any things that you'd want to share for the upcoming week?
Yeah, of course. Don't forget to apply for our AI leadership retreat. This is a leadership in the information age retreat. We're going to focus on leaders bringing these technologies into their companies, understanding both the technical and financial implications of that, but also the ethical considerations of how they bring these technologies to their teams without, making the teams afraid, without bringing fear and anxiety to this. So a lot of it's going to be about what are these technologies? What kind of frameworks do you need to understand these technologies? We're going to be doing it in the most incredible setting in Austria, where we are going to be doing paragliding and driving around in classic cars in the absolutely most beautiful 400-year-old renovated barn in the Alps. It doesn't get any better than this. The peer group is going to be the most highly curated, spectacular group of people. We've already got about a third of those seats spoken for.
Yep.
So yeah, sign up. It's in June. We may even have another retreat before then if we can get ourselves organized. But yeah, so excited for that retreat. Getting a lot of really good feedback from people who are applying.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I'm super excited just thinking about everyone that's going to be coming there, the topics that we have planned for discussion. Can't wait to share more. I'm also encouraged by some of the things that we have planned around strategic AI adoption or usage
Hmm.
framework. Is we're going to be open sourcing it in the coming months, and so that's something that you can look forward to because we want the community to contribute. We want to have
Hmm.
examples available so that you can understand how other companies are leveraging AI, how they're adopting it. But to get you something tangible in your hands, where if you're looking to go it on your own and think through strategic AI adoption, our goal is to make this as easy as possible for you. So, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Today was an amazing conversation, Richard. As always, thank you for the time. If you're listening to this on YouTube, consider subscribing or liking this. Consider going over to Maginative.com and subscribing. We send out a weekly newsletter with the top stories. So you don't even have to be checking the news every day. On the weekends, while you have some downtime, you can just quickly skim through things. And we're thinking of other formats also, more audio formats
Yep.
that you can use to consume the content. But with that,
Reports,
yep,
analysis. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline that you'll be seeing soon.
yep. So with that, everyone, thank you again. Until next time, one love.